He talks about how we used to be in the garden, right? And the Garden of Eden, I'm talking. And this is probably metaphorical, literal, take it however you want, but talking about how things were right. We came from a garden, something happened, we stepped out of the garden, and the Enneagram is a way to help us get back, to find our way back home, to find our way to our true self. So when we step out of the garden, there are 9 different archetypes that become our personalities that are attempting to help us to get back home, because we do belong home. We are at our truest selves when we are home. So what does that look like? Well, the 9 different types kind of outline our human ways of trying to get back home. And I love that language that he uses. There are so many great things in this book to kind of give us language and context for what our behavior is and why we behave the way we do. I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of each Enneagram type. If you're familiar with it, forgive me. If you're not, then this is a good introduction. And even if you are familiar with it, his language around this is a really great way to kind of repurpose the Enneagram. We kind of give these labels to each of the 9 types. Every author that I've ever seen that works with the Enneagram, there's usually kind of a label for each type. What Chris does is he kind of takes that label down, and it gives it this really beautiful, well-rounded way of looking at it. And I'm looking for it. I'm trying to find the page, and I didn't have it marked, so bear with me here for just a second. I do know where it is. Hold on. Because I wrote it down. Okay. So, let's see. Type. Hold on here. I'm going to find it. And it will be so worth it when I find it. Aha. Okay. So type 1, which is typically labeled as the reformer, he describes it as those who strive for excellence as moral duty. And then type 2 is normally the helper. He describes it as striving for lavish love through self-sacrifice. Type 3 is usually the motivator. He describes it as striving for appreciative recognition through curated successes. Type 4 is usually the artist or the individualist. He describes them as striving for discovery of identity for their own faithful authenticity. Type 5, which is usually the investigator or researcher, he talks about it striving for decisive clarity through thoughtful conclusions. Type 6 is the loyalist. He says they strive for steady constancy through confident loyalty. Type 7, which is the entrepreneur, they strive for imaginative freedom for inspirational independence. Type 8, which is the leader or the challenger, is described as impassioned intensity for their own unfettered autonomy. And type 9, which is normally the peacemaker, he describes as striving for harmonious peacefulness as congruent repose. So just a little bit of that. And so in my groups, I do a lot of Enneagram work. In my training as a spiritual director, I received some training other than my study over the past 18 years in the Enneagram type. And I have found so often that it is so helpful as something to become more self-aware. It's always just a really good idea the more self-aware we become, the more we become aware of what our true selves are, how we relate with the world, how we relate with others. It's such an important self-knowledge tool. So there's that, and so this book actually as well, this book by Christopher, two things he does in here. He goes into detail about the Enneagram and also how it relates to contemplative practice. So in this personality type, there are 3 different intelligence centers. We all have head, heart, and body, and we all operate to a certain degree out of all of those, but whatever type we lead with is going to be either head, heart, or body type. And he lists in here ways to be contemplative if you're a body type, a heart type, a head type. And so I've looked in the back here, and I'm a type 4, the artist, and that's a heart type. So for heart types, he suggests centering prayer, which I had always been reading about, interested. There's a book by Cynthia Bourgeault, I think her last name is. I hope I'm not butchering that either. She works with Richard Rohr, who runs the Center for Action and Contemplation out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And she talks a lot about centering prayer, how that's been really big for her. And as a heart type, Chris suggests that centering prayer is a great way to find your way back home towards your true self. So I have been engaging in it more. I think in the past I've kind of circled around it, couldn't really, I don't know, it. And he says to give it a good 6 months to see, to either let it sit down, deep down, or to pass on it. And so I have been sitting with God in the centering prayer, and it has really been powerful. So if you want to talk more about that, contact me, flyforward.org. Go to my website there. Go hit the contact page and contact me. I want to hear about your experience, maybe with the Enneagram, maybe with centering prayer, and how we can move more toward our true selves.